Hi, this is Mark Elias, founder of Democracy Docket. Look, not a day goes by that we do not see further evidence of Donald Trump corrupting the legal system, both through his frivolous filing of lawsuits, but also through the weaponization of the Department of Justice. And I had an opportunity to talk to the good folks at MSNBC, Alicia Menendez, sitting in for Nicole Wallace, about two really important stories that everyone needs to be paying attention to. Number one, the lawsuit that Donald Trump filed against the New York Times being dismissed by a federal judge in Florida, and also the ongoing corruption of the Department of Justice and the misuse of U.S. attorneys' offices to go after Tish James. So I want to show you some clips about this appearance, and then I will come back and offer you my thoughts.
This afternoon, a federal judge in Florida issued a rebuke of Donald Trump in one of his latest attempts to crack down on the free press. A judge throwing out the president's defamation suit against the New York Times, calling the complaint improper and impermissible in its current form. The lawsuit, which asked for $15 billion in damages, accused the Times and four of its reporters, as well as the book publisher Penguin Random House, of disparaging Trump's reputation as a successful businessman. The judge called the suit unnecessarily lengthy and aggressive. He criticized Trump's lawyers for waiting until the 80th page to lodge a formal allegation of defamation, and for including ahead of it dozens of florid and enervating pages lavishing praise on the president and enumerating a range of grievances. Joining me now, voting rights attorney and founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias. Mark, I want both your reaction to the initial lawsuit that was filed by Donald Trump and now to the judge's dismissal today.
So they're very much connected, right? I mean, the initial lawsuit was a press release put on a caption signed by a lawyer, and that is what the judge saw it for. The New York Times did nothing to warrant a defamation lawsuit. This was a lawsuit that was frivolous from the get-go, and it was drafted in a way that, frankly, it is difficult to imagine was drafted by lawyers. And that was the basis for the judge doing something today that is extremely unusual. I mean, usually if you file a lawsuit, you wait for the other side to say all the things that are wrong with it and why the case should be dismissed. Here, the judge, before even hearing from the other side, read the lawsuit and said this simply violates the most simple rules about how one files a complaint, the initial filing. It is supposed to be a short, concise statement of the facts and the law and the claim for relief. And as you pointed out, this pleading went on for paragraphs and pages before it even got to any allegations. And so the judge struck it and gave them a few weeks to file a new pleading and put them under a 40-page limit, which is also pretty extraordinary.
This is some more of what the judge wrote in his dismissal. Quote, "A complaint is not a public forum for vituperation and invective," Judge Merriday wrote, "not a protected platform to rage against an adversary." It seemed to me that a lot of what the judge saying was, Mark, is, are you actually filing a legal document here? Or are you trying to win this in the court of public opinion? And I wonder through that lens, Mark, just how damaging a lawsuit like this is in terms of time and money spent, in terms of reputational damage, even if you have a judge quickly dismissing it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can speak from personal experience. Donald Trump sued me and a bunch of other people for racketeering in Florida in 2022. And in that case, the judge dismissed the lawsuit. By the way, I did not settle. I did not seek to settle. I did not compromise. We just litigated and we won. Donald Trump is now appealing that to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. But the judge threw that lawsuit out because it was under a different rule, but essentially a similar principle. This was a whole lot of Donald Trump venting through a lawyer putting their name on it. And, it is time consuming. It is expensive. It is burdensome. It is, even when you're in the right, you lose a certain amount of sleep over it, right? Because here it is, the guy who is the president of the United States is suing you. And so, we shouldn't take these things lightly, even when they are frivolous, or perhaps especially when they're frivolous, because we have seen him weaponize this against his political opponents and to extract settlements in cases that are completely nonsensical. And good for the judge here in preventing at least some of those costs and burdens from being borne.
The New York court system is totally corrupt. They use the state and the city to go after me. They take top people in the Department of Justice and put him in the Attorney General, Letitia James, the fascist and racist Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James. I call her Peekaboo James. We have a very bad Attorney General there. She's a political hack who got elected saying, I will get Trump, I will get Trump. You have an Attorney General who's a total stone-cold crook, New York State, Letitia James, a total crook.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock here in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez, in for Nicole Wallace. Someone right in the center of Donald Trump's revenge campaign is New York Attorney General Letitia James. The same Letitia James who brought a successful civil case against Trump and his businesses, finding that he and his company knowingly committed fraud for years. And while an appeals court last month tossed the nearly $500 million fine, Trump has never wavered in his viewing of James as his enemy. James has also fought back against several Trump administration policies that would impact those in her jurisdiction. So I want you to just keep all that in mind as I tell you the next part of this saga. Earlier this year, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Bill Pulte, referred James for criminal prosecution, alleging she committed mortgage fraud when she bought a house in Virginia in 2023. However, the U.S. attorney in charge of looking into that case, the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, has since found nothing. And now, that man, who Trump only nominated for the job back in May, is poised to be fired for the sole reason of following the facts, not charging a person with a crime they did not commit. ABC News was first to report this, and they write this, quote, Trump is expected to fire the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia after investigators were unable to find incriminating evidence of mortgage fraud against New York Attorney General Letitia James. According to sources, the decision to fire Siebert could throw into crisis one of the most prominent U.S. attorney's offices, which handles a bulk of the country's espionage and terrorism cases, and heighten concerns about Trump's alleged use of the DOJ to target his political adversaries. As former speechwriter John Favreau put it, the president is firing prosecutors who won't help him get revenge on his political enemies by making up fake crimes. And if that fake crime accusation rings a bell, it's because it's straight out of the Trump playbook. He's recently alleged other perceived political enemies of committing mortgage fraud as well. Senator Adam Schiff of California and Lisa Cook, the Biden-appointed member of the Federal Reserve Board that Trump has been trying to fire. All of this revealing a disturbing pattern at Trump's Justice Department, where it appears the rule of law is not the guiding force, but rather Trump's own personal wishes. And that is where we begin this hour with MSNBC senior investigative correspondent Carol Leonnig, also with me, host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. And lucky for us, Mark Elias is still back with us. Carol, I know you have been doing a lot of reporting on this story. Lay out what we know at this hour about Eric Siebert.
So last night, what we learned was that Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, one of the very prominent U.S. attorney's offices in the country and part of the Department of Justice, was alerted that he would be fired if he did not resign. And we also learned later that his first assistant, basically his deputy, was given the same sort of warning. And so that office was bracing last night and most of today for both of them to be fired or removed from their supervisor jobs. And we have one source who says they believe that they have been removed from their jobs, but maybe remain in the Justice Department, but just not in those positions. And Alicia, there's one other thing to say about all of this reporting, which is much of Donald Trump's furor over this has been that somebody hasn't charged Letitia James, as you laid out. He believes she should be investigated. He has made clear that she should be prosecuted. But the facts in this case and the U.S. attorney have concluded that there just isn't a basis to go forward. And what's very worrisome to this team in this office is that this U.S. attorney, Eric Siebert, was viewed as being a loyalist, in a sense, very well allied with the Trump administration and the Trump leaders and appointees of the Department of Justice. But even he feels this is just too far a bridge.
And Mark Elias, when the loyalists are the ones being tossed, you know that we are on the precipice of crossing the Rubicon.
We've crossed the Rubicon. I want to reset what is normal or should be normal. In a normal administration, Letitia James never would have been investigated. You know, in the last block, you asked me about the inconvenience, the heartache, the burden, the cost of being subjected to one of Donald Trump's frivolous civil lawsuits. Well, imagine what it is like to be the victim of his witch hunt against his political opponents. So, you know, with all due respect to this U.S. attorney, the fact that he opened up a criminal investigation on someone who had done nothing other than offend Donald Trump should be itself disqualifying. The fact that the people who are arguing for keeping him are arguing that he is a loyalist, that he is part of the Trump team, only goes to further deepen the corruption that is through and through the criminal justice system in the Trump administration and the Department of Justice. Because, of course, U.S. attorneys shouldn't be on teams. And people who want to keep U.S. attorneys shouldn't be arguing that they stay in office because they are good members of the White House team. And so, while I am happy to hear that perhaps he is resisting the ultimate pressure to bring a case that he has acknowledged there is no case to bring, while I'm happy to hear that, what about the months of bad publicity that she has received falsely? What about the sleepless nights? What about the money, the lawyers, all of that she has had to endure? While Donald Trump has weaponized this Department of Justice, we cannot lose sight of just how absolutely abnormal and dictatorial and authoritarian we are already across that Rubicon.
Mark, I really appreciate that reset, especially because in the case of Letitia James, I mean, this seemed to come down to what amounted to a clerical error. There were contemporaneous paperwork showing that it was, in fact, an error, contemporaneous documents showing that it was an error. And to your point, they could have dismissed this from the get-go. The fact that it came this far, Rev, reminds us that this moment is not normal. This Department of Justice is not normal. This administration is not normal.
No, the fact that it went into a criminal investigation when there was no prima facie evidence of a crime is what's disturbing. Two things I think we ought not forget. Even when the courts here, the appeals court, overturned the fine, they did not overturn the conviction. So they didn't say that Donald Trump was not guilty of what State Attorney General Tish James had indicted him for. They just said they felt the fine was too high, and I understand that's being appealed. But they left the conviction there, which means that she didn't go after him on a basis of something that wasn't there. And the Carroll case also remained there. So let's not act like he's paying somebody back who made some allegations that were false. Two juries found that she was correct in what she brought against Donald Trump. The other point I want to make is that imagine if you, all right, he's fired, say the prosecutor in Virginia is fired, and you're asked now to become the prosecutor. Are you really expected that you are going to indict or prosecute Tish James after one prosecutor already said there's nothing there?
I mean, you mean this as a rhetorical question.
As a rhetorical question is what person would throw their credibility away in their career to come in and do something that has already been determined by your predecessor? Who was a Trump loyalist? There's nothing there. So, I mean, I just don't understand who would stand up and put their hand up and say, all right, send me in so I can do a kamikaze mission for the president that's going to be out of office in 2.5 years.
Mark, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to what may or may not be a rhetorical question on the part of the Rev, but I also want to read you this from James's lawyer, who writes that he told ABC News this expected firing is a brazen attack on the rule of law. He said, firing people until Trump finds someone who will bend the law to carry out his revenge has been the president's pattern, and it's illegal. Punishing this prosecutor, a Trump appointee, for doing his job sends a clear and chilling message that anyone who dares uphold the law over politics will face the same fate. I am interested in Rev's question, and I'm interested in something that we teed up in this introduction, which is this is an important office. This is an office that deals with espionage charges. This is an office that deals with our national security. If the office is in turmoil, that means something for Americans, not just Eric Siebert.
Yeah, so first of all, to the Reverend's rhetorical question, of course, Donald Trump anticipates that he will finally find someone who, to use the words of the prosecutors in New York, who resigned rather than dismissed the charges against Eric Adams until, he finds someone who is a fool or a coward enough to do it. And that will be an absolute travesty of justice. And I have some confidence that the judges will see it as such. I have some confidence that the judges would dismiss the indictment. I have every confidence that a jury would eventually acquit. But at what cost? At what cost, as you say, Alicia, to not just Tish James, but to the administration of justice? I had on my podcast a few months ago Dan Goldman, who is a congressman from New York, who's a former federal prosecutor, and he made a really important point, which is, for people who really want law and order, for people who want the bad guys to be prosecuted and put in jail, this is terrible news. Because the politicization of the Department of Justice gives all of those bad guys now a series of arguments that they are the victims of political prosecutions when they're not, because it becomes impossible to know which are the real prosecutions and which are the trumped-up ones ordered up by the White House. And so this is bad all the way around, whether you are a fan of the Attorney General of New York, whether you view her as courageous as I do, or even if you are a critic. This is just bad for democracy.
Well, Carol, to that point, we talked about the possibility of a chilling effect. Are we already seeing that?
Absolutely. To the entire point of this panel, I've been hearing from sources since last night saying this is, quote unquote, the scariest moment for them. Now, most Americans don't know who Eric Siebert is. Most Americans don't know what the Eastern District of Virginia is and its importance in national security cases and in large criminal conspiracy cases. It used to be called the Rocket Docket because they had so many prosecutions, such a volume. Most Americans don't know that. But what prosecutors would tell them if they had this stage right now is that if you are forcing one of your own appointees and pressuring them to bring a case for which there are no facts, where is the line? Where is the line? Are we going to, in their question, are we going to start ginning up cases without sufficient facts, without sufficient predicates to harangue or punish those that have trifled with or annoyed or hurt in some way Donald Trump? And obviously, Letitia James is at the top of his list because she really scored in getting a scalp from him, in getting a conviction that he had engaged in decades of fraud in his business.
Rev, I want to ask you and Mark the same question through different lenses, which is this takeover of our justice system. It will be fought politically and legally. For you, politically, how do you think Democrats prosecute the case against Republicans that they are allowing this to happen under their watch?
I think they ought to bring up clearly and as aggressively as they can that we're talking about people on an enemies list that are being prosecuted, that prosecutors are saying there's no evidence there. Judges are upholding the convictions against Donald Trump. And he is pardoning people at the same time. The whole nation is fighting political violence, no matter what our view is of Kirk. You got a president that pardoned people that assaulted and harmed law enforcement, pardoning them while he's taking away prosecutors who won't prosecute people where there is no evidence. You couldn't get a more graphic breakdown of a criminal justice system that's supposed to be fair than on one side you're letting thugs go that went in the Capitol building and hurt members of Congress and members of law enforcement, but on the other hand you want to fire people that are saying, I have no evidence here to go forward. We are becoming a lawless country.
Mark Elias, I think it's worth noting that while presidents appoint U.S. attorneys, once they are appointed, they have tremendous latitude. They don't check back in with the person who appointed them to make sure that they are doing their bidding. That is how the system is designed. To your point, this is an undermining of the system. But I wonder which legal guardrails are still in effect to stop this complete and utter takeover of our judicial system.
Yeah, I think that's actually the big question, right? I mean, first of all, we got Pam Bondi, who's also supposed to be operating independently. She's the Attorney General of the United States. You know, she's been in the White House more often than many of the staff, as far as I can tell from the outside. I mean, she's in the Oval Office hanging out with him, yucking it up. She's doing hits on Fox News from the lawn. And, you know, does anyone really believe she's not taking direction from Donald Trump directly on what to do and what not to do? Does anyone believe the FBI director, Kash Patel, is doing anything other than the bidding of Donald Trump? And so, of course, from Donald Trump's standpoint, he believes that everybody in the federal government, including the U.S. attorneys out in the states, operate as his agents. You know, are his errand boys, are there to do his bidding. But it is incumbent on the good people of the federal government to stand up and to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the right thing for the American people, and I'm not going to do your bidding. And if you need to fire me, and I will go out loudly. We saw that work in the Southern District of New York when Eric Adams was under indictment and Donald Trump wanted that indictment dismissed. You saw resignation and firing after firing, and it brought to the public what is going on. So my request to the folks in the Eastern District of New York is don't go quietly. Don't do the wrong thing. Do the right thing, but don't go quietly. Make sure people know what is happening here because it is completely antithetical to the rule of law. It is important for judges to know it because they will be hearing these cases going forward. And most importantly, it is important for the American people to know that our system of justice is being corrupted. All right, so that was me talking to Alicia Menendez about these two blockbuster stories that are going on in tandem that really are completely intertwined. Sure, one involves a defamation case against a large media conglomerate, the New York Times. The other involves the misuse of the criminal justice system to investigate and to potentially indict Tish James, the Attorney General of New York. But they have in common, and I hope you heard me bring these together, a common theme, which is that Donald Trump wants to use the legal system to force his adversaries to bear legal costs, to lose sleep, to have to hire lawyers, to face uncertain outcomes. Because he thinks that if he does that, it will do two things. Number one, for some number of them, they will back down. They will bend a knee. We've seen that in the legacy media. We have seen that with way too many business leaders. We have seen over and over again the threat of legal action can cause people to take a step back rather than a step forward at precisely the moment we need them to do that. The other thing he's trying to do is to create an overall narrative, a reality that does not exist. In this reality, Donald Trump is the victim. In this reality, Donald Trump is the one who suffered at the hands of the New York Times. Donald Trump is the one who is unjustly accused in the state of New York. He is trying, as he did with election denialism and the big lie, to spread a narrative that casts him rather than as a bad doer. It paints him as the victim. Look, I know what this is like. You know, I mentioned in that clip, and it's not something I talk about all that often, but I've started to talk about it more and more because people need to hear it. Donald Trump sued me and a bunch of others for racketeering in the state of Florida in federal court. And I didn't bow down. I didn't bend a knee. I didn't try to settle. It never occurred to me. Nope, I stood tall and we litigated and we won. And Donald Trump right now is trying to appeal that loss of his to the 11th Circuit. And the only thing I offer Donald Trump is another court to tell him that he is wrong. And, you know, look, it doesn't mean that this has not been an unpleasant experience. It is. I mean, being sued by the President of the United States, you know, for racketeering is no small thing. And it meant that I have to have lawyers. And it meant that I need to, you know, pay attention to what's going on in this case. But that is the price of being a citizen. That is the price of not being someone who is willing to capitulate. In this moment in history, it is the least that people like me can do. And if it's something that I can do, it is for sure something that the billionaires and the multinational corporations should be doing. It is certainly something that the largest law firms in America should be doing. And so we are seeing that lack of courage on their part, but it is not an excuse for a lack of courage on any of our parts. But most importantly, it cannot be the excuse by which all of us normalize this absolutely terrible, abnormal behavior. You heard me say that I am glad that the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia seems unwilling to bring a frivolous indictment. But why was he willing to open a frivolous investigation? Why has it gotten to this point? And The legacy media needs to ask, why did you write story after story after story about Tish James as if there was some there when in fact there wasn't? Where is that soul searching? Where is the soul searching that shows that we need to be incredibly skeptical from the get-go when Donald Trump files a lawsuit or Donald Trump announces a criminal investigation or his cronies do? So look, that's going to be the subject of a lot that you hear from me in the future here at Democracy Docket, because I founded Democracy Docket in 2020 to be an independent pro-democracy voice that will be uncompromising, unbought, and unbuyable. There are no venture capitalists, there's no private equity, there's no corporate overlord. We are here to give you good, accurate information. And if you want to help support that mission of independent pro-democracy media, please do me a favor right now. First of all, subscribe to this channel. Second, like this video. Number 3, if you can, and you haven't already, please subscribe to Democracy Docket's newsletters. There are free options. There are paid options if you want to provide financial support in addition to getting exclusive content. Engage with Democracy Docket. Help support independent media because it has never been more important than it is today, and I promise it will never be more valuable than it will be tomorrow. Thanks. I'll see you next time.